Good evening. Welcome to Legacy Battle. We are now available not just on YouTube, but also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. So make sure you get on all those and subscribe to all of them. And of course, we've got the Facebook group, so please join that. If you're interested in sponsoring an episode, please contact us in the comments section. You can see the sponsor video that we had. We put them at the beginning, so it's guaranteed to be seen. I am Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. Here with me tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone is Brian King. From Steelers Nation South, Raul Coffin. And from the Sunshine State Sports Jabber, that's a lot of S's. And the Walker Report, Bradley Walker. And of course, our special guest tonight, four-time All-American from Stanford, winning a national doubles championship. She was a member of the U.S. Federation Cup team twice and the Whiteman Cup team once. She's won 11 tournaments in the WTA and reached a rank of 7th best in the world for doubles. You know, after retirement, she's still working in tennis. She's been on the Tennis Channel, the USTA World Feed, ESPN Australia. She does the Australian Open down there. So, ladies and gentlemen, USTA Mid-Atlantic Hall of Famer, Elise Burgin.
Well, thank you. Oh, boy.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So obviously, like always, we're going to have Q&A with Elise about her career after the debate. Tonight's debate is the greatest female tennis player of all time. I know that some of the females we're talking about tonight came up in our greatest rivalry show that we had prior. But now we're going to give you some more in-depth look at some of them. But we're going to start tonight with Serena Williams.
Serena Williams. When I think about the greatest players and athletes of any sport, I think about the ones who perform on the biggest stages, and nobody performs bigger than Serena Williams. 23 major titles, 14 doubles titles, 2 mixed doubles titles, and 4 gold medals. She also tied with Steffi Graf that is as one of the only women to win each major title at least 3 times. She has 10 titles after the age of 30. Amazing accomplishment. No other woman has more than 3 after the age of 30. She was the oldest player to reach #1 at 35 years of age. She also tied with Steffi Graf for the #1 ranking at 186 weeks. So her consistency, unparalleled. She has the most major title wins with 362. That's 54 than Martina Navratilova and 84 more than Steffi Graf. She performed on the biggest stage for over 2 decades. That's why, to me, she's the greatest women's tennis player of all time.
She's for sure should be on this list. So my question here with Serena is, I don't feel, and I could be wrong, you're gonna know better than me, Elise, of course, but like she's never had that true rival like Martina has had, that Steffi has kind of had with Monica Seles. Like I've never seen anyone push her to her limits. Maybe now that she's a lot older, that she has that. But like during the middle of her career, I never saw anyone who pushed her. So I guess my question to you is she this good, or has there just not been someone great to compete with her?
She's this good.
She's this good.
And you always have to look at generations, and each generation of tennis player of the greats, they move the game forward. And I think you have to look at these players and say, has this player moved the game forward? And you look at a Serena Williams, and she did have a rival, and that was number 1, her sister. And if you think about Venus, she won 7 slams. It's not over for her yet. She's won 7 single slams in her career. Do you know how many more she would have won had it not been for her sister? She would be so far into double digits. So she had Serena. And if you think about, she had Venus as a rival, but if you think about Serena's career, who did she intersect with? Early on, it was Graf. You know, Graf was still around when Serena began. And then there was Hingis, and you could say it's Hingis and Davenport and vanquished these incredible stars. And then you move along, and then there is, if you think about it, Kleisters, Annan, and then you go to today's game. She's spanning, you know, a couple of decades of great tennis players. So you can't look at Serena in terms of, there's not that rival like Martina had Chrissy, like Court had King. It's a little bit different. But you look at Serena's game, and what did Serena have? Why has she changed the game? The greatest serve in the history of the game. If you had to pick one big shot, what do you want? You want the great serve. Serena has the greatest serve ever. She was the first player who could end a point on the first shot, whether it be with the serve or the return. And that is huge for women's tennis, on top of her athleticism and her speed and the combination of power and what she has up here. One of the great pressure players I've ever seen. And you talked about the slams that she's won since turning 30. We've never seen anything like that. 10 since she turned 30. And then after she had the baby, she's been into the finals, I think, of at least 4. No, she hasn't won one since she had the baby. But Olympia, who's really not a baby anymore, but she won a
title. She won a title while pregnant. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, she did. So she is the only one who's ever won while pregnant. So, okay, I went on and on, but she's unrivaled.
Brian, I'm going to ask you, because you were on the prior tennis show we did, and I think it came up. Didn't we kind of decide that Venus-Serena wasn't the best of rivalries because it was too one-sided? Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah,
because
that's
Serena
right, yeah.
just kind of dominated it, so we didn't really consider it a good
that's
rivalry.
right. And to add to that, another person that at least didn't mention was Maria Sharapova. I mean, she was a heck of a player too, and Serena
dominated.
Sorry, vanquished her. Yep. Well, if you think about the one that could have been a rival, also, yeah, you're right. I mean, it was just so lopsided. Other than that Wimbledon, their first huge encounter was the Wimbledon that Sharapova won, and I believe Sharapova was 17 at the time, and wins the match and gets on the phone with her mother. I'll never forget that. Pulls out the cell phone and is on with her mother when she wins that Wimbledon title. But that match, it sparked something in Serena, because Sharapova never got a whiff at Serena after that Wimbledon final. I mean, it just turned a light on in Serena, and poor Maria, who was a great player and won 5 slams of her own. You're right. I mean, I didn't even mention Sharapova in that conversation of rivals because it was so lopsided.
Brad, it was mentioned, Serena's still winning here in her 30s. We see Federer, he's in his, I think he's in his late 30s, still winning. Yeah. Tom Brady's in his 40s winning. Is it, you think it's easier nowadays because of what we know about the body and how we can train it than maybe some of the older players from the 60s and 70s? Do you think like longevity is easier now?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think with the way technology's been, again, seeing Tom Brady now, probably play till 50. He might play to 50. Who knows? But yeah, I think with the way that science is, and the way that now the players can diet and they can change things, and how about that? I mean, how about winning a Grand Slam while you're pregnant? Who back in the day you wouldn't even think about doing that. And Serena goes, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And she did it. So, I mean, yeah, that's amazing on its own, just right there. But, yeah, I think with the way science is, these older players can now prolong their career a little bit longer compared to back in the day when, Father Time comes knocking, I got to hang it up. Now today they're like, you know what, I'll push Father Time a little bit away. Let me play a couple more years, and then I'll let him come in and
I forgot to add that she was in the finals 8 months after having a pulmonary embolism. I mean, the woman is a
Well,
marvel.
And yes, and you take that into account too, with Serena. And yes, she's had the blood clots and post pregnancy. After, I mean, she had, I mean, had the dealt with the blood clots again, but mid career, it could have been. I mean, it was life threatening. It was life threatening for Serena, and people forget that and how she came back from that. Yeah, I mean, it goes. She is so remarkable. You can go on and on. And just, Bradley, to that point that you made about the longevity, if you look at the draws of Grand Slams now in tennis, you'll have 30 some people in their 30s in that draw. And even after the first round or the second round, which was unheard of. Even when I was playing, that number 30, the number 30 was almost like, okay, you're now on the other side. And today it just, with how you can prolong careers, players, especially tennis players, travel with physios. They you now hear the word team. If you ever listen to a post, to the commentary, or when players after an event and they're doing their thank yous. I want to thank my team. Teams didn't exist. When I was out there were no teams. Maybe Martina had a little team, but other than that, players didn't have teams. And now it's a part of the game, but it's helping prolong careers. It's just night and day. Technology is helping. It's just, you can play well into your 30s now, no doubt about it.
All right, well, let's move on to Steffi Graf. Just before I do, hats off to any woman who works through their pregnancy. That is just an amazing thing. My wife did it until the day before she gave birth, and she was an RN on her feet all that time. So
oh my gosh. All right.
A man would never be able to handle that. So
that's right. A lot you guys can't handle. Okay.
All right, so Steffi Graf. I'm representing Steffi tonight. She
Yep.
played from 82 to 1999, so a nice long career. Started professionally at 13 years old, so very, very young. Her 88.69% win percentage is better than Serena's. Just want to point that out. She has 107 titles, which is third all time. 7 Wimbledon titles, which is the most. And we judge Wimbledon as the Stanley Cup, the Super Bowl of tennis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big stat. She got 22 Grand Slam wins, Olympic gold as well, 11 double titles. She's the first male or female to win the Golden Slam, and she was 19 when she did that, and she still was the only. I think she's still the only player to do it in a calendar year. I might be wrong on that second point, but
yeah, you're right.
She still is. Okay, so and then we got just some quotes. Billie Jean King said that Steffi Graf was the best. Chris Evert calls her the best all-around player because she could play on clay and hard courts as well as she played on grass. Usually there's always a distinct advantage for one person. In 1999, the Associated Press named her the greatest of the 20th century. She's ranked number 1 for 377 weeks. I'm pretty sure that's still more than Serena has had. And then in 2020, Sportscasting.com called her the GOAT when they were comparing her to Serena. And Graf is, she's one of the few players who excelled, as I said, on grass and clay, and that's really hard to do. That came up a lot in our prior tennis show. The advantages that we see. Nadal has a huge advantage on clay. She could play on both. Can't stress that enough because there's so many different types of courts in tennis. But she had the best forehand in the business. I mean, they nicknamed it the Fräulein forehand. That's a great nickname there. I love that. She had poise. She was quick, disciplined, consistent, and she held her emotions, which, I'm not trying to knock just Serena tonight, but Serena has had some problems with emotions out there on the court. We all know that. She's been fined a ton. But just a quote from Steffi that I really like. She says, "You can't measure success if you have never failed." And I love that quote. That's a great quote. And then she also said, when you lose a couple times, you realize how difficult it is to win. So I really like that too. Those are kind of like just some quotes to live by. And then I'll just finish with this. She has the best winning percentage of any female at Wimbledon. So not only does she have the most wins, but she has the best winning percentage at 91.35. And she has the best winning percentage in Grand Slam tournaments altogether. So stat-wise, she's definitely one of the best. She's lived a quiet life since retirement. You don't hear a lot about her anymore. She just kind of wanted to do the family thing, and I respect that. So, Elise, I feel, we're talking rivalries with Serena. So her Steffi's rivalry with Monica, got
what could have been.
What could have been, right? That was a big part of our last show. I mean, if that rivalry goes on for 10 years, do you think that like maybe Graf's name is even higher and better than what it is today?
We'll never know. I mean, and that conversation, we can have that conversation all day. What would have been had Monica not been stabbed? What would it have meant for both their careers, for Steffi's and for Monica's? How would they have pushed each other? Would they have pushed each other to even greater heights, or would one have just knocked the other out at some point and dominated? And of course, that's something history, it leaves it just for us to surmise what could have been. But you made the point right away that Steffi, who now goes by Stephanie, but since I've known her since she was 12, I can never, it's hard for me to call her Stephanie now, but Steffi, she's a player that was just about the business of going out and playing tennis. She didn't, the other things, that the fame, the fortune, the other things that went along with it, she wasn't focused on. She was so focused on her tennis. She played her matches. She didn't care about the limelight at all. Her focus was 100% tennis. And as someone who faced her on a number of occasions, and we talked about the greatest shots of all times, and the four women that we're going to talk about as the four greats, they each were the great power players of their generations. And Steffi of her generation was the greatest power player with the greatest forehand that we have ever seen in tennis, that we probably will ever see in the women's game. It was an absolutely dominant shot. She had the great dominant shot to go along with a big serve. Her athleticism, all the athleticism, all the women we're talking about, is unparalleled. Her movement was just ridiculous. I mean, she covered, you could not get the ball by her. She covered everything. But with her forehand, she covered 3/4 of the court, meaning she dominated 3/4 of the court with one shot. And to find that little inkling of an opening, maybe to get to the backhand, which was good. She pretty much sliced the backhand, kept her in points, didn't get her in trouble, but her dominance with the forehand is something that we've never seen, we may never see again. And it obviously is what puts her in the pantheon of the greats and made her so dominant for her generation.
Rollo, I was throwing a few knocks there on Serena. Obviously I want mine voted in over yours because the goal is to win, of course. I mean, I'm gonna give you a minute.
Okay.
If there's anything you want to say about Steffi, yeah, you're welcome to throw it out, Rollo.
Let me just remind you who has the most titles in the Open era. She has one more. She also has,
and she's still going too. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
She also has 84 more major wins than Steffi. So on the biggest stage, she performed at a higher level, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
And I will just put in, you take into account that she won the Golden Slam. And let me just think. Margaret Court won the Grand Slam. Maureen Conley won it in the 50s, and the winning the Grand Slam is winning 4 in a calendar year. I mean, Martina Navratilova won 4 in a row. I think Serena even won 4 in a row, but never in a calendar year. So Steffi won the calendar year slam and the Olympics. That golden slam, is that going to be done again? I don't know. Those are the things. But you look at all these players, and they have such mind-boggling records. Each one of them. We're not going to talk about one person here that has some sort of record that you just makes your head just spin. And from Serena's to Steffi. You look at all those. I mean, I think Steffi, and the last point I'll make with Steffi is she did have the great variety of winning. She was great on all surfaces, and you made that point, and it's beautiful because if you think about it, I think she had 4 Australians, 6 French, 7 Wimbledons, and 5 US. That is just across all surfaces, and she is playing in an era where you're playing on grass, clay, and hard. It's just remarkable. All right, I'll zip it.
They both they're both of all the women that ever played tennis. The only two that have at least 3 titles on each.
Yep.
The U.S. Open, Australia Open, Wimbledon.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
Impressive stats. All right, so we're gonna move on to Margaret Court. Brad, before I let you start, I'm gonna say this about Margaret. When Brian and I were putting this debate together, we come up with a list. We start with maybe 15, then we take it down to 10, and then we try to get it down to what we're going to do for this show. I did not have Margaret in my top 5. Now, I let my panelists pick, their player. You went with Margaret, so prove to me why she should enter into my top 5, and maybe all the way to my vote later tonight.
Well, let's start with that was the biggest rival for Billie Jean King. We'll start with that. One of the greatest women tennis players. She has 24 Grand Slams, one more than Serena there, Rob. At the immediate moment, Serena, of course, is still playing. She was very dominant in her era. I saw the movie they made about Billie Jean King with Emma Stone as Billie Jean, and that was one of the players that everyone, when the WTA was invented, that was the one player that they said everyone should fear. And Margaret obviously, won 11 Aussies, 5 French, 3 Wimbledon, 5 US Open. She was ranked number 1 in the world a lot in her era. Let's see here real quick. I'm screening down here. She's got the most single titles of all time, 192. Let's see. She's also with the mixed and also mixed doubles and doubles. She's got 64 majors in singles, doubles, and mixed combined. That's likely to stand the test of time. I don't think any other female tennis player will reach those accolades. I think that's all I have, Mike.
That says a lot. When I was looking up Steffi's stats, obviously I'm seeing Margaret above her in a lot of categories and above everyone else in a lot of categories, and I found that so surprising. I mean, for me, I always thought just Navratilova dominated in every category. But the more research you do, the more you learn. Especially after when we did our first tennis show, I learned a lot about these women that you see a lot on TV, but then you learn more when you do the research. So, Elise, so Margaret Court has had some issues off the court, obviously.
Yeah.
So the show is Legacy Battle. It's not necessarily just who is the greatest, but who has the greatest legacy, and there are things that taint some legacies. So, what are your thoughts on Margaret, and not just the off the court stuff, but also her play on the court?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to quickly, the off the court issue. Is it my opinion that she's tainted her legacy? And everyone has an opinion. I believe she has with her stance on gay rights and the fact that for many decades, 3 decades, I would say now that, that she has been very outspoken, and many people find it offensive. I have found it offensive. And in my mind, has that tarnished her legacy? For me, yes, there's been controversy. Should her name be on the Margaret Court Arena at the Australian Open? It's been very uncomfortable for the tennis world to have to, this issue has become, with Margaret, has become uncomfortable. And so I have been offended by the stances that she's taken. Push that aside. Margaret Court, the tennis player, without question, one of the greats of all time. And she does have, look, she's got the most slams. In all, singles, doubles, and mixed, 64 Grand Slams in her lifetime. It's beyond remarkable. And all these greats, we talked about being the dominant physical player of your era. That's what Margaret was. She, in her era, she was overpowering. I think and we're going to talk about Martina later, as Martina's the one that really brought fitness to the game. Well, Margaret did it too. Margaret was a player that was known to work out, to lift weights, to do all of those things, to set herself apart, even back then. And she was so dominant with the combination, with the serve, the volley, the fact that she moved well. She was good on all surfaces. And you have to remember that Margaret played in an era where 3 of the 4 Grand Slams were on grass. So the Australian, the US Open, and Wimbledon were all on grass. So she didn't have the hard, you didn't have a player who won on hard courts like the others have won. She played in the Open era, but much of her career was before the Open era. But she was very good on the clay, and that she could dominate on grass and the clay, utterly remarkable. In picking who's the greatest of all time, and it's not Margaret's fault that the Australian Open in way back when was more a regional, was more a national event. It's considered a Grand Slam, but the greats did not all play. The greats of her era did not all play all the Australians when she was winning those. So did she pad her numbers a little bit? It did pad her numbers, not to her detriment. You play what's there. But I think it affects where I would put her, when you're making who is the greatest. I think it affects it just a little bit.
Brian, let me come to you. Let me take you outside the tennis world and throw this question at you. If I ask my wife, do you know who Venus Williams is? She says yes. I ask her, you know who Martina Navratilova is? She says yes. I ask her, you know who Margaret Court is? Who's that? So she's not quite the household name like the other people we're discussing today. Is that going to hurt? Not her legacy, but being recognized as the greatest overall, do you think, if she's only known to the tennis world compared to the others?
Yeah, I think it does. And it's almost kind of like, because of the era that she played in, she set this standard, this amazing standard. But does that mean that she's the greatest player? No, I think there's been better players that have come along since her. But she's the one that sort of set the bar so high out there. And that's the reason why her name's on the building. That's the reason why, when you look in the record books, you see her records. But it's just, I think it's just like what you said, she's to the this generation, and she doesn't really have that influence outside of the controversy, unfortunately, in today's news cycle and whatnot. But yeah, it was just she's for what she did in her generation was unbelievable. But it's hard to sort of transcend the following years and the following generations.
Had she beaten Bobby Riggs, would we all know her name in that match?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think so,
and it's such a conversation point, because the precursor to maybe one of the biggest matches in tennis history, which is amazing. It was a match that wasn't actually an exhibition match, maybe one of the most famous match in tennis history. Was the stage was set because of Margaret losing to Bobby Riggs on Mother's Day, which I know we'll probably talk about that as we get further into this conversation. But she was obviously a household name in her day. Did she transcend the sport like her great rival, Billie Jean King? No, I would say no to that.
Okay, let's move on to our last representative, we do have honorable mentions tonight, but our last representative for the actual vote tonight is Martina Navratilova.
All right, Martina Navratilova, one of my favorites. She came out of Czechoslovakia. She actually defected in 1975. During that time is when they had the communist Soviet bloc, so she had to get out of there. She came to the United States, and she joined the tour. She was left-handed, but she was born a righty, so I think that helped her throughout her career. She was kind of natural from both sides. As far as it goes with singles, she won the Australian 3 times, the French twice, U.S. Open 4 times, and Wimbledon 9 times, including a 6 consecutive winning streak for the Wimbledon from 82 to 87. And she ended up with an 86.8 win percentage in singles matches. And she has the record for 167 WTA titles. 1983 was an unbelievable year for Martina. She actually, in singles, she won 86 out of 87 matches. So only 1 loss, which is unbelievable. In doubles, she won 83.9% of her matches in her career. And she has a record of 177 WTA titles. So you put them together, we're talking about 344 WTA titles between the singles and doubles. Total Grand Slams, 31 wins. She won all 4 in the year of 1984. Amazing. She held the #1 spot for both singles and doubles for 200 consecutive weeks. No other woman ever did that. And, she was just an attacking player, just relentless, aggressive. Her power was something maybe the game hadn't really seen to that level before. And her athleticism was really amazing.
Well, we know why her doubles record is so good. We got one of her doubles partners right here on the show.
Oh my, yes.
Okay, let's not forget, they won. They won as a doubles team. Elise and Martina. So
one of her 100, she won 177 doubles titles and one right here.
Hey,
and that's
bragging rights.
So you guys know, when it came to doubles, you don't ask Martina to play with you. The protocol is Martina asks you. You did not have, no one had the chutzpah to walk up to Martina and say, hey, you want to play doubles with me next week? It was Martina. And actually that week that she did ask me to play, from as she recounted to me in years since, she said, you didn't answer me when I asked. You never gave an answer right away. I said, of course I didn't. I was in such shock that I didn't. But so Martina, dominant in doubles, and her partner, she and Pam Shriver, the greatest doubles team in the history of the game. And I have to give that up, that Pam and we've been BFFs since we were 9 years old. So so any conversation where Pam's involved, I'm a little prejudiced to the positive. Martina, in the pantheons of the greats, and again, I will reiterate, the dominant power player of her generation, which is the generation, for me, my career, it kind of spanned Martina. Martina was a bit older. Martina and Chrissy were older. Steffi and Sabatini, they were younger, but I got to, and Graf and Celis, but I had the good fortune, or not great fortune, of crossing over with all of those careers. And Martina, for this generation, dominated. She suffocated you with her aggression. Without a doubt, we talked about Serena, the greatest forehand of all time. We talk about Serena, the greatest serve, Graf, the greatest forehand. Martina, the greatest combination of a serve and volley the game will has ever seen. And the greatest backhand volley. Billie Jean had one of the great backhand volleys too. But, all of the greats, they have one thing that just sets them apart. And Martina's dominance during that period. And I played, it's so funny. When I was looking at her records, I thought, when she was on that match streak, did I play her during that streak? And then I kind of was looking down like, oh my God, yes. I was one of those victims of that when she just went on that incredible streak where she was utterly unbeatable. She went through that period where you walked out on the court and no one wants to think they're defeated before you walk out. But in the back of your mind, you know, if you had a chance with Martina, something was either going to be wrong with her or you were going to do the most special thing you'd ever done in your lifetime. So what she could do on the grass, Wimbledon, utterly dominant with the 9 titles, great on the hard courts, won enough French Opens, was good enough on the clay to say, yep, I mean, she could dominate on it all. And I will make the argument that if you take in the full breadth of the game, all of the disciplines, singles, doubles, and mixed doubles, she, in my mind, is the greatest because of how dominant she was in all 3.
It's funny that you said that she picked you as a doubles partner. Nobody ever asked her. She asked everybody. When we had Jonathan Stark on, he said that she picked him to be mixed doubles for Wimbledon, which they won Wimbledon together.
They did.
And he was like, I wasn't going to play, but my mother made me do it, and I'm glad I did. You know, so
yeah, good job, John.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Can I ask this question?
Okay.
Elise, did you consider her like a really intimidating presence?
I was gonna ask that too.
As a human being, as a you know what? As it turned out, she turned out to be an absolute wonderful friend, and Martina, you know, on the court, her game was intimidating, but as a human being, she was anything but intimidating. And Martina, as we've seen, Martina was very human. She's very human, and whatever was going on in Martina's life, it was amazing. And she had, you know, turmoil. I mean, to me, she is one of the most courageous human beings I have ever known in my lifetime. The bravery of she defected to this country as a young woman and had to leave her family behind, left, you know, what was then Czechoslovakia behind, to never return for, I can't remember how many, for so many years, to not see her family. And I got to know her family and her parents, wonderful parents, and her sister, to have the courage to pursue, you know, that courage to defect was one thing. And then through the years, her courage in standing up for human rights, for the LGBTQ rights, whatever it is, Martina, there is no fear in that woman. If you want it, she will tell you the way it is. She's the most honest human being I think I've ever known. And I just have such admiration for her as a human being. So
let me tie into Brian's question. So you were very young when you played her in 1985 in the finals in Houston. Yes. So were you intimidated at that day, or?
So, all right. So I will tell you the story about Houston. So, you know, you brought it up. So as it turns out, it turned out to be one of the great weeks of my career in terms of I will tell you, I was playing the week before. It was the Tournament of Champions doubles. And I had an injury there and I was thinking of not playing the next week. And then it was at that Tournament of Champions, that doubles. And I think I got to the finals of the Tournament of Champions with Kathy Horvath. I can't remember if we played Martina and Pam. We played Martina and someone in the finals. Memory escapes me a bit. But I was thinking that week, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I can't play Houston the next week. And then all of a sudden, Martina comes up and asks me to play doubles. And amazing how my injury, oh my gosh, that it is amazing how I recovered from an injury that I thought there was no way I was playing next week. And so to the question of, so it was funny to play doubles with her. I will just quickly say, so we're both left-handed and we both played the ad court. We both, as doubles in our careers, both played the ad court. So, you know, Martina said, you know, when that week started in Houston, goes, and the way she talked, I will play the deuce court. I'm like, okay, I'm playing wherever you tell me to play. And so she was a wonderful partner. She, and playing doubles, when you had the chance to play with the greats, what it allowed you to do was get into their minds, because they're sharing their thoughts. You learn how they think on the court. And there's no greater lesson to learn how the greats think. And they share it with you when you're sharing the court with them. And so it was a little intimidating to play with her, because if we had lost, whose fault it was going to be. It was going to be mine. But that week, playing with her, being around her, I just think, and I remember she was being coached by Mike Estep at that time, and Mike and Barb Estep, they were around, and it was, I ended up having 2 top 10 wins in singles that week. I just think the whole aura of it, and it just, it did something for me, that it turned out to be one of the great weeks of my career. Not that we're here to talk about me, but it was just, but it does link into Martina and the aura of Martina. And in the end, I did have to go out and play her in the finals of singles. And I did go out to play that finals. I went out there to win, but she's Martina, and she's dominant. And we were actually, it was on a hard true court, which is not her. If you have a chance against Martina, it's going to be on a slower surface, but she was still even dominant on that.
Okay, let's before we move to our honorable mention, let's do tonight's trivia question. Put your answers in the Facebook group section. We'll mail a prize out to you. First person who gets it all right. If you've won prior, you're still ineligible. Sorry, guys. Name the tennis player spouses of these celebrities: Brooklyn Decker, Bridget Wilson, and Steffi Graf. So that's a pretty easy one. Usually our questions are really hard, so somebody better get that one. All right, let's move on to our honorable mentions here. Let's keep it at 30 seconds to a minute. Brian, we'll start with you for that, so go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I got Chris Evert. I mean, she was the American girl next door. She had a great rivalry with Martina. She won 90% of her singles matches, 18 Grand Slams. She's got a record 34 Grand Slam finals. But unfortunately for her, it was often Martina that was waiting for her in those Grand Slams.
Yeah, absolutely. Rala, who you got?
I got Monica Seles. I mean, before that unfortunate incident on court, she was dominating. I mean, from 92 to 93, she was 55-1 in major matches. She had 8 Grand Slam titles before the age of 20. If that does not happen, in my opinion, she goes on to be included on this list that we're talking about tonight, because she was so dominant at such a young age, and her career was still taking off. She was number 1 in the world when that happened. So, that happened. If that doesn't happen, no telling how many titles she would have won and what her legacy would have been had that not happened.
Bradley?
I got Venus Williams, obviously the older sister of Serena. And what both Williams sisters brought to the game is power and athleticism. She was world number 1 in 11 weeks, 7-time Grand Slam winner. She was the first African-American woman to be number 1 in the world. And she is the only 2 players that reached the U.S. Open in their first attempt. The other one was Ms. Pam Shriver in 1978. Nice. So I think had Venus, again, Serena came after Venus. I think those 2 together changed the game, changed the women's game in my era. And like Elise said earlier, I think, if Serena hadn't been dominating, I think Venus would have been right there with her as well, holding all those records as well.
I agree. Totally agree. So my honorable mention tonight is Billie Jean King. Anybody who's watched this show knows that I am a stats guy. I love stats, and I could go on about Billie Jean's stats, 12 Grand Slams, a bunch of other stats, but that's not what is most important with Billie Jean King. This is a woman who you can't measure her impact just on the court. You have to measure her impact off the court. She fought for higher pay for women, equal pay for women. help break down barriers for females that, not just in tennis, but it expanded even into like the women's rights movements. She was a pioneer of gender equality, something that is still being worked on today, obviously, but she was definitely the start of it for tennis. She founded the Women's Tennis Association. And I think she coached Martina for a little while too. Right.
You got it. Yep. Good job.
And then as you mentioned earlier, Elise, you got 1973, the Battle of the Sexes. She beats Bobby Riggs. Riggs was 55 years old. I will throw that out there when it happened, but still just a huge moment. If anyone hasn't seen that movie, definitely check out the movies. Steve Carell did a great job, by the way, as Bobby Riggs in that. So, but she may have the biggest impact outside the sport of any player we talked about today. So, definitely deserves at least an honorable mention. But Elise, anybody you think you want to mention?
Well, I mean, you guys all have a great list, and of course, Billie Jean King. She's the one player that has transcended the sport. Was she Life magazine's top most influential people of the 20th century? You think about her impact, and that match. People who didn't know anything about tennis, she became a household name, and she is a household name. So what Billie has done for women, and I think some people think that it's only about women. Billie is all about, as she'll always tell you, equality. For everyone. It is not just women. She is all about equality. So she stands alone on a mountain on a Mount Rushmore because of what she is, because of her contributions. And then the rest of that list, Chris Evert, the greatest clay court player we've ever seen, and those records, and you played Chris, and this was a player that never gave you a thing. She was technically off the ground, was technically perfect, and you saw so many players come after Chrissy. A generation of players who looked like Chris with the two-handed backhand. Chris and Tracy were the great technicians with the two-handed backhand and that style of play. And you talked about Venus, you talk about Monica, and Monica was without a doubt the most consistent hard hitter. She was two hands on both sides, and we hadn't seen that until Monica. She took the ball early. She stole your time, took time away from you. And she was so unique. And just for Monica, for 1 second, think about it. She was stabbed in 1993. In 1992, the year before, she won 3 of those 4 Grand Slams and she won 3 slams. She won the Australian, she won the French, she won the US, and was in the finals of Wimbledon. And then she won that next Australian Open. What could have been, we'll never know. But so glad that an incredible human being, and what she went through, it was tragic. So, but she survived. She won 1 more slam after that, and is living a good life. Thank goodness. Okay.
All right. And just shout out to the ladies who just missed our list tonight: Martina Hingis, Justine Henin, Yvonne Colley, and Lindsay Davenport. They were in our finalists as well. So let's move on to our vote for tonight. Remember, guys, can't vote for your own. So we're going to start there with Rollo. You're down on the bottom of my screen, so I'm going to start with you. Who are you voting for?
Well, when you talk about Serena Williams, a lot of her records and her accomplishments are compared to Steffi Graf. So Steffi Graf is my greatest of all time, simply because her records are right there with Serena's. The Grand Slam titles, the overall ranking of worlds. She was that good.
I'm gonna go next. I want to say Serena. I really do. She's had the longevity that we didn't see in some of the other people that we talked about. Martina played a long time, but she wasn't the dominant person that she was in her younger years. You know, she was still very good, very good. But I think I'm going to go with Martina just because she has. I think she made women's tennis bigger nationally than anybody else. Her name was a very popular name. Everybody knew it. Her stats, obviously, they stand for themselves. And you throw in the doubles and the mixed doubles, she dominates this list, regardless of who may have the records for the individuals. Tennis is more than just an individual. We got doubles, we got mixed doubles. So with the whole pie, I think I'm taking Martina. Brian.
For me, I feel like I think it's Serena, and the reason why I think there's just some times where she just looks so natural, and what she does is just so effortless. And it's like all these other girls, they seem like they had to work so hard that for what they were doing. But Serena, not that she isn't a hard worker, but it just comes so naturally to her. It's just amazing, just the God-given talent that she has.
And Brad, I meant to tell you your stats that you threw out and what you said. That moved Margaret into my top 5. It didn't get her to number 1, but incredible stats for that woman. So who are you taking, Brad?
I have to agree with Brian. Again, like we mentioned earlier, obviously, a guy could not win a Grand Slam being pregnant. Yeah, I got to put Serena on. And what I like about the Williams sisters in general is, again, and Elise mentioned this too, that the athleticism and the strength that they brought. They kind of transcended what a women's tennis player looks like today. The muscles and being athletic as they were. And again, I hope Serena ends up winning 2 more Grand Slams and passes Miss Margaret Court all time. I'm hoping Serena has 2 left in her, but I would be, for me, it's Serena Williams.
Okay. That takes us to you, Elise.
You're making okay, and I think I pretty much said what I. If we're talking about singles and we look at Grand Slams and we look at it through that lens, I choose Serena. If we talk about the breadth of the game, the combination of all the disciplines, the singles, the doubles, and mixed, I give that to Martina, and maybe because I watched it right before my very eyes. What she did was beyond the pale. And I do want to, just a final couple of points. It's interesting how today we talk about the great, who won the most slams. Slams are so important, and yes, they are. But the era that I played in, and you listen to Chris and you listen to Martina, week in, week out was extremely important also. And you look at how they littered up the stat sheets, winning so many titles week in and week out. And maybe because, look, you didn't have the money in the slams. You had good money, but you didn't have the money there is today. People can retire on what they earn in the slams pretty much today. I mean, but you played week in and week out, and what there was a greater importance put on your week in and week out results than I think that we see today, when all people talk about are what are their results in the slam. So I take that into account. And the last thing about Venus Williams, I know you made the point about Venus, and I just want to say, like Billie Jean King, like some of the other greats, she has been very important off the court and her contributions, and she's been remarkable, and I'm a huge fan of hers. So this was a great list, guys, and you did great. This was fun. It was wonderful, and you made some really salient points, and I applaud you, and I thank you for putting a little spotlight on women's tennis.
Absolutely. We do every sport you could think of on this show. So we are open to everything. Congratulations, Rollo, your first victory on our show. So
Yay!
That gets you a point. That gets you on our list there for that. So congrats on that. That's 3 for her, 1 for Navratilova, 1 for Graf. So let's move on to our Q&A for Elise. Brian, go ahead, start us off.
I just wonder what did you feel like was your greatest strength on the court, and what did you feel like was something that you always had to work on? It was sort of like a nagging kind of weakness you always had to work on.
Tennis players, we never like to discuss weaknesses. Don't you know? You never want to admit that. For me, well, I'm left-handed. I'm still left-handed. It's really, that conversation was really interesting. Like, Martina was not a natural left who started. Sharapova supposedly she was a lefty, and then became and played right-handed. Nadal is a righty who plays left-handed. I'm a lefty who played left-handed, and that was an advantage for me. Being left-handed is a big advantage in tennis, and I had the type of game that if you didn't walk off the court against me and you didn't feel like you had to go out and practice for a couple hours because I just messed with you, then I didn't do my job. Because I wasn't going to knock you over with power, but I hit with a lot of topspin on my forehand, and I tried to work the points with my forehand, using my forehand to set things up. In terms of strength, it was that I could do everything pretty well. Could I serve and volley? I played in an era where the grass was faster, so you had to learn you had to adapt to every surface. And my one singles win was on clay, but I reached some semis on grass. I got to some finals on hard court, so that I could adapt to all the surfaces, that I did everything pretty well. I wasn't going to knock you over, but my leftiness, my hands, I think if I would say if there was one thing I was blessed with, was with soft hands, which was a huge thing, which helped in doubles, and being quick and having those reflexes and being quick around the court. Weaknesses, and I hope that my intensity was a bit of a strength, but I think for me it was deciding what type of game do I need to play. Do I need to be aggressive? It was, for me, it was the decision making, because I could do a little of everything. It was more, what's going to win me this match? And, sometimes knowing that I had to be the aggressor, I sometimes was more in a conservative mind, an aggressive game in a conservative mind sometimes, and had to figure that out. So, and I wish in matches, I learned when I was young, I learned how to slice my backhand, which was a great thing because I was a two-hander, but I stopped hitting through my backhand the way I should have, because I could then depend on that slice. So if there was one thing I could go back and do again, it would have been just going after that backhand more in singles. But, ifs and buts. So, I was very fortunate to play when I played, and the experiences I had. And would I do some things over? Of course you would, but what is hindsight? 2020. So it was what it was. That's an answer.
Brad, go ahead.
Elise, I guess the question would be, what are the differences between when you played in today's game? Would it be easier for you to win in today's game, or would it be easier to win during your playing days?
Look, I'm 5'4", and I want to say 3/4. When the hair is up, I'm getting close to 5'5". I want to believe that with my game, I had a lot of variety, that I could have figured it out. It's very interesting when I, at the slams, when I walk, down the corridor at the US Open, I look at some of these players, I'm like, whoa, we had a couple of 6-footers. Now, not only do you have 6-footers, but they're athletes too. They used to say, well, the ones that are tall, they can't move. Well, now they can move, they can do the whole thing. And so, obviously the technology, the string technology has changed the game. There are two things I wish I would know, which I'll never know. What the string technology would have done for my game, because I was a little, I don't want to say before my time, but I had the Western type forehand, semi-Western forehand, in an era that you didn't see that, where today's technology, that type of grip, the string technology, the ball just has a lot of oomph, you could say. Do I know how I would deal with the power of all these players? I don't know. I would hope that I could mute it somehow, that I would figure it out, but the game has changed. And, I want to believe that I would have competed. I know I would have had a doubles career, I mean, for me, I contended for those slams and doubles, in singles, I did get up in that close to that top 20. Do I know that I would have been there in singles? No, I don't know. I think in doubles, I still would have, definitely had that career, even at 5'4". So, but boy, the game has changed, but technique has not. And I'll just say one other thing. I believe that because players, ground strokes are just, they dominate with power with ground strokes now, that you don't see the technique on volleys. You don't see the breadth of complete players that you saw when in the era that I feel that I grew up in. So the game has changed. I would like to see more complete players, which I think you don't have to be a totally complete player today to still be really, really good where you had to be then. Okay. Have you noticed I go on a little bit?
No, it's good. It's good. All right, Rollo, you're up.
This is a two-part question. So
Okay.
you played on all the major tournaments. What was your most memorable match that wasn't Martina related?
Okay.
And what was your
Wow.
when you walked out onto each one of the courts for the first
Mm-hmm.
time, which one were you most intimidated by? You're like, oh, I'm playing here.
Okay. Oh goodness, most memorable match. Gosh. Well, I played my best friend, and two matches, and Pam and I grew up together. We started playing. We've been best friends since we were 9 years old. We grew up in Baltimore together, and we played on. Well, it was Armstrong. Now it's Ash Stadium, but center court at the U.S. Open was Armstrong, and we played singles in the third round, and it was one of those moments where, wow, these two little kids from Baltimore, who the first time they played was at Clifton Park in the 70s, in front of their parents, are now at a packed Armstrong Stadium on the feature match on a Saturday night at the U.S. Open playing each other. And it was a 3-setter, and it was Pam would say, I was horrible, but even though she won, but that was one of those matches. You're never going to forget that. We also played against each other in the semis of Wimbledon. And once again, you're playing that match and you're like, whoa, gosh, look how far we've come types of things. So, I think those are matches I'll never forget. College tennis, look, I'm going to tell you, I played 4 years at Stanford. We won 2 NCAA titles. Winning those were, at the time, those were very big. My last college match was winning an NCAA doubles title, and I had been injured that entire year. And I had never won an individual in my 4 years, where people thought, that it was going to happen, and it hadn't. And it came down to my last chance. And getting that individual NCAA title was, for me was big. And I'll just say, when you represent your country, it's just something, it just gives you goosebumps. And I was so fortunate to do it twice. And Whiteman Cup, we played at the Royal Albert Hall, where people were dressed in, it was cocktail attire. And that was wild. And then playing on 2 Fed Cup teams, so those are things you don't forget. And I'm just going to say the courts, I only played on center court at Wimbledon once, but I spent my childhood in front of the mirror. In those days, you curtsied for the royal box. And so I had practiced that stinking curtsy so many times in front of my mirror growing up, like, one day you might do it. Well, it came. It only came once, and I will just never forget. It was like, I don't even know who the royalty was, like the Princess Michael of Kent. It was, and I couldn't have cared less, because if there was royalty in the box, you had to curtsy. And I'll just never forget going out there. I'm like, I am going to curtsy. And, like at least I didn't fall when I did it. So, playing, I was very fortunate to play every center court that the sport had. Center court at Wimbledon, there's nothing like it. You'll never forget it. And I was very fortunate to win on center court and to have played on all the center courts at Chatrier, at the French Open in Australia, and of course, my slam. When I say my slam, as an American, the U.S. Open, several times. You can't beat it. So I was blessed. I was fortunate, and no regrets.
Thank you for representing America on those Fed Cup teams. We love
It was
representation for the country.
yeah. Well, wearing that flag on your, it was on the skirts. You had that American flag, and you just felt, something really special.
Well, we'll get you out of here with this tonight. I've read that you're quite a prankster, so maybe you can tell us your best prank. But my actual question is deeper than that. So
I'm too old to be a prankster now.
But so in 1989, sadly, your mother passed in a car accident, and you were quoted as saying, "Terrible things happen in life. You go on living. Your perspective changes. You realize tennis, isn't the only thing." And then in 1991, when you failed to qualify for Wimbledon, you were 29, you lost to a very young player. You said, "One phase is ending, but really it's just the beginning." Just the beginning. So my question is for you. You had some things in life that would be upsetting to people, but you have kept a positive outlook through all that stuff. So how do you keep positive in times like that, and continue to move on and go on in life?
So, and I have said this, of course, what happened to me, and I was young. Look, I was in my 20s, and you wouldn't wish anything. What happened, what I experienced, when you lose, you lose a loved one that you never get to say goodbye to, and it was an automobile accident, and it was awful, and it was the worst thing. That phone call that no one ever wants in their life, I got, and I wouldn't want that I don't want any human being to ever go through something like that. But, it's, boy, you learn. It put life in such perspective for me. And I will just say, the tennis community is such a family. And that family, gosh, did they rally for me. And, and I talk about my best friend, Pam, who was right there. But I can go on and on. When at my mother's funeral, I looked up, and there was, and look, the tennis world doesn't stop. And I looked up, and there was Martina. It was, oh my gosh, and it was they were such a family and helped me through this. I had so many friends to help me through that period, but I've never, because when you go through that, life takes on a whole new perspective. You appreciate every day. You tell people you love them. The things that you take for granted, you never take for granted again. And because it happened to me young in my 20s, I have appreciated, I really do think I've appreciated every day since then, maybe, and not differently than others would, but I know that it can change in an instant. So I don't take anything for granted. And do I tell the kids, wear your seatbelts? Do I, sometimes you worry, you learn not to worry. Yes, bad things can happen, but you go forward in life and you just try to accomplish. And I think everyone, there is loss. Everyone experiences loss. And the thing that I tell people is nothing takes away memories. Memories will be there forever. And you do find a way to go on, and you do find the positives, and you will smile. For a period of time, I thought, will I ever smile again? Will I ever laugh again? Will all those things? And you do. So, I don't wish anyone to go through, everyone goes through loss at some time, but you want to spare people, but it happens, and you have to, life does go on. I know I just went on a little bit about that, but
it's beautifully said. It's
a life experience, and it just makes you appreciate people. And boy, did I my tennis friends and the tennis community, I mean, it's a family that even if I don't see some of them haven't seen some of them in 20 years, 25 years, you can pick up right away, right where you left off.
That's great. And there's pranks. You want to tell us about one prank?
So
Maybe?
I don't know about the prank. I don't know about that. What I would say is, the only thing I will say is that, so when we were playing, we did a show. Eastbourne was the tournament before Wimbledon. And each year there was a show that the players put on. And it was, our own, it became, oh my gosh, it became very big. People lined the streets before our crazy show in Eastbourne before we walked in, even though it was a tennis, it was kind of just within the tennis community. But in the last many years, I was the one that had to write. I wrote the show, and we staffed it, and all the players played parts, and we wrote that show, and it was fun, and we made fun of people, but never anything nastily. And so if people look at that as pranks, people came to expect it. That show became. I used to stink up the joint when I played in Eastbourne every year because I had so much pressure. Because in the end, we had to write that show. So getting that done, and I think that's where people thought, okay, she didn't make fun of people because we did it in jest, and it became, for the years that we were on tour, it became that one night each year became quite the thing, and we had a lot of fun with it. But trying to think the worst, I don't know, no pranks are coming to mind, but
okay.
I'm sure
are you choosing to forget?
Are
you choosing to forget those pranks?
Maybe I am. But I will tell you one thing, and it was not a prank. It's the worst thing that could happen to a tennis player, and I did it to another tennis player. So at Wimbledon, in all the we have the locker rooms. We all have our rackets all over the place, and so my racket company, which many players we had the same racket company. And are we allowed to say racket companies at the time? Well, you can see it behind you in my picture. Okay. So I played with Prince. Right. And so whatever, I finished for the day at Wimbledon in the locker room, picked up my rackets, left, blah, 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 blah. I'm in, and we would stay out at Wimbledon. At the time, I wasn't staying at Wimbledon. I was staying in the city. So it could take an hour and a half to get back sometimes. And I'm just in the car riding back and blah, blah, blah. And then I just looked at my racket bag. I was like, oh my God, these aren't my rackets. And then I knew whose rackets they were. And I think it was Tammy Whitlinger. It was like, oh my God, she has a match. I took her rackets. Never in my life have I panicked more than taking someone else's rackets when they had a match. I mean, you can't play with someone else's rackets. You need your own. But somehow, I don't know, we got back in time, whatever. She got her rackets. I think she had heart failure. She probably lost 10 years of her life waiting. But yeah, that's the worst thing that I can remember that I accidentally did was take, and I didn't do it at the Podunk Open. I did it at Wimbledon. It was just awful.
All right. Well, thank you to Elise Burgin for joining us tonight. We appreciate you coming on, and
it was fun.
Some really good answers.
It was great.
You could definitely see the commentator and analysis that you are in your answers. That was great. We appreciate it. I want to thank everyone for watching tonight. Please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and join that Facebook group where you can win our trivia questions. And even Brad, before he joined us as a panelist from time to time, he won a trivia question. So, we do mail those prizes out to you. So everyone have a great night. Thank you for watching.